International issues are much on the mind of many of us these days. Today we're talking with three people who are involved with the Central Texas Model United Nations program, getting young people interested in international issues. Stay with us for Austin Faith Dialogue.
Austin Faith Dialogue, at the crossroads of religion and life. A series highlighting the cultural and social interactions between the worshiping and religious communities in and around the capital city. Austin Faith Dialogue is brought to you by the Austin Metropolitan Ministries in cooperation with KXAN. Join us now in Austin Faith Dialogue.
Welcome to Austin Faith Dialogue today. It's good to have you. I'm Sandy Wilder, your host, and today we're talking about the Model United Nations program, which involves students, teachers, and other adults in getting interested in international issues, and three guests, the most we ever had, but this is an important program. First, we've got Adam Chambers, who is a student at the University of Texas, right?
Yes, correct.
And Secretary General for the Central Texas Model United Nations. Good to have you.
Nice to be here.
And Bobette Hughley, you're a teacher at Lake Travis High School, right?
Yes.
And therefore a teacher sponsor
Right.
in the Model UN program. And Mary Jansen, member of the Model United Nations Association here in the Central Texas area. Let me not assume, first of all, that people know that we have a United Nations Association or that we have a Model UN program. And Mary, I think you were involved in the starting of some of these programs. So maybe you can talk about the genesis of all of this.
It started for many years ago for me in the 70s when we were living in The Hague for a semester, and one of our sons participated in the Model UN there in The Hague, which is today is the largest one in the world. Another friend of mine, Joe Smith, was aware and interested in the Model United Nations program through her grandson in Houston. We became members of a UN subcommittee of the Peace and Justice Commission of Austin Metropolitan Ministries, hoping that there's something we could do to help the United Nations. And when we discovered that we were both interested in the Model UN program, we wanted to have one here in Austin. We contacted the club, the Model UN club at UT, and asked them if they would be willing to be the secretariat for an Austin UT connection. And they were, and that started it. And we've had wonderful students at UT and in our high schools. And we're really thrilled with what's been happening.
I wonder if some people might, in hearing the term Model UN, think, gosh, maybe they're just putting together little actual models of something, but that's not it at all. Bobette, what is the Model UN program?
For the students, the high school students that participate, it's a simulation. And they go through all the steps that you would go to if you were representing a country in the United Nations. And Adam, feel free to add if I'm not saying it correctly. But they take issues in countries and they become those countries, and they find out positions that that country has towards certain issues, and then they represent them as the debate goes on to solve problems, you know, that come up on the issues. And it's a wonderful organization because it's a simulation, so they actually learn parliamentary procedure, they write resolutions, they debate, they caucus, and it really is, from a teacher's point of view, I think a completely gifted and talented program. It utilizes every skill that you would think that a student would need to have to survive and be successful in the 21st century, in my way of thinking. I mean, it's just an incredible program to watch as they really perform, in a sense.
Excellent leadership development
Oh,
program.
it's incredible.
But I heard Bobette say high school students. Now, you're in the University of Texas, so what's your relationship to the program, Adam?
Well, the relationship that the UT students have with the program is that we actually run and organize the program. Every year, a collection of UT students basically figures out what topics will be addressed, how to organize different schools, to get in touch with the sponsored teachers like Ms. Hughley, and direct from there the actual runnings of the conference. They are the presidents of each committee, as well as the people who organize locations, times, awards, speakers, and everything else. There's actually the physical running of the committee, of the conference. The students themselves are the participants.
This sounds like an awful lot of work. Is this credit for you, academic credit? Why do you do this?
Well, it's not academic credit at all. In fact, it's not even, there's no specific class this fills in a requirement for. This is mostly, well, the students do this mostly because they enjoy this sort of activity. About 2/3 of our students actually did this activity in high school and continue to do it in the university level.
So therefore, the Model UN program, you were mentioning Houston a minute ago, Mary. The Model UN program is not just in Austin and not just in,
Oh,
in
no.
Houston.
No, there are 173 Model UNs over the entire world. There are 107 just in the United States today that are registered, I should say, because there are others that actually have Model UN programs but haven't registered with United Nations Association. But there are 66 outside of the United States today and 107 within the United States from coast to coast, north to south.
Now, this sounds like an awful lot of work and therefore I assume money. How did these things happen, these conferences and all the organizing behind the scenes? Who underwrites all this?
Well, at our conference, we try to keep the delegate fee as low as possible so that anyone who's interested can participate. We've been getting by on a shoestring. We've had some help from the churches, but most of our income has come from the delegate fees. We just learned that we are going to get some foundation help from the Trull Foundation, so we're thrilled about that. That'll give us a boost, give us some things that we haven't had before.
Well, congratulations. I know you can use that well.
Yes.
And Bobette, then, if Adam and Mary are donating their time, I assume for you as a full-time classroom teacher, this is extracurricular. So what's in it for you?
Just to be able to be there and watch the kids do this as a teacher, it's just, you know, for me, it's something that I look forward to every year. And to go to the conference and watch them debate and solve problems, I really learn a lot from my students, and this is an opportunity for me to get to watch them really do something that is very relevant. And, you know, so as a teacher, this is kind of the ultimate. And I think that's why you see the teachers returning back, the same teachers, because you're just, you know, it's just such an incredible opportunity for students.
What got you started?
Well, I have an interest, I have a master's in political science, and I have a real interest in what's happening in current events. And so this was a natural, kind of a natural draw for me to want to do something like this. I heard about it through my principal, and he gave me a letter about it and asked if I was interested in sponsoring it. And it was, you know, of course, I wanted to do it. So it's been wonderful. And I will say that some of the schools, my school actually helps pay the fees for the students to come, but I know that all the schools have different obstacles that I mean, some of the students have to pay their own way. A lot of the schools, I don't think, fund the registration fees necessarily. So it kind of varies from school to school how you get there, because you do have to pay to participate, and it's so worth it. But you know, you have to find a way to make it work.
Right. And I've heard you all talk about there and conference. So Adam, what actually happens? What is it that everybody's leading up to?
Well, the actual days of the conference, which are this year, January 14th through 16th of actually 1999, it's leading up to a great deal of debate in the committees that we've had set up, and everyone's basically doing research, as we've said earlier. And what it leads up to is basically students coming together at the University of Texas, talking about and discussing their country's positions in certain issues, and then going into committees and actually debating out the issues as to pass resolutions as to what they'll do about some of the problems we identify every year they need to address.
So we're talking a weekend event, right?
Yes.
And folks coming to the University of Texas. Are we also talking things like opening ceremonies and welcomes and all the ceremonial stuff too?
Yeah, well, we do have our own opening ceremonies, which usually features a speaker of some sort. But one thing that we're introducing this year is a lot of free time for students to get to know one another and one another's countries and their country's positions on certain topics. We're doing it by supplying pizza, basically.
That always works for students. And then do you find that the students who are involved in the Model UN program actually are in contact with the delegates from their country who are at the United Nations? I mean, does it sort of then flow up to the UN in New York?
Well, that's true. I mean, a lot of students, when doing research of certain minor countries, Sierra Leone or smaller countries throughout the African continent, a lot of times do call or write to the representatives in New York, and that's usually one of the best ways to get back information about that country. And that's what a lot of them do, is a good way of getting a lot of information about their country right from the source.
And you as Secretary General, then, your role is to what?
Well, to get the smooth operating, make sure the operations of the whole affair is very smooth, organize the teachers, make sure they have all the information as to dates and times and planning procedures, and make sure that they know everything they need to know, sort of information and committee topics and what countries they are.
And use your good offices, perhaps, like the actual Secretary General does?
Well, we do that
To get-
too. We've handled disputes and settled all sorts of different claims between countries, but most of my job is mostly setting up things and fairly bureaucratic.
That's probably close to real life too, right?
Oh, definitely.
And Mary, do you work directly with students also, or is there some other role for the adults in the United Nations Association?
Well, the biggest job we've had since the beginning was to try to interest teachers. Now, we can't take any credit for Bobette, but the beginning teachers, we've worked very hard to get their interest because they're all so busy already. And we sent three or four down to Houston to observe that conference. And most of those teachers that went either became sponsors or saw to it that someone at their school was a sponsor because they could see what a fine thing it was. And we're still, of course, continually hoping to interest more teachers. To give another little insight about what's possible, last spring, some of our Secretariat members were able to go to the real United Nations and participate in an invitational Model UN there.
Now
So this,
right.
and also, do you
No,
mind
go
if I
ahead, go
keep
ahead.
talking? Also, it's possible for the high school clubs, if they're interested, to participate in other Model UNs around the country.
Now that's a great idea.
They can travel if they
Right,
want to.
cross-fertilization of ideas and having people go somewhere to see what happens. I like that. We'll come back in a minute and talk with all three of you about why you spend so much time in this good program. So stay with us for the second half of Austin Faith Dialogue. you're still with us for Austin Faith Dialogue as we talk about the Model United Nations program. But before I go on, let me remind you that if you'd like your announcement included as part of Austin Faith Dialogue, be sure to fax it into Austin Metropolitan Ministries about 3 to 4 weeks before your event happens. And again, that fax number is 472-5274. We're talking about the Model UN program with Secretary General Adam Chambers and teacher sponsor Babette Hughley and community sponsor Mary Jansen. Before we talk a little bit about motivations, maybe we ought to get a little bit clear about how this is organized, because some people know that there is at least a general secretariat in the United Nations, but folks may not know about the rest of that organization. I assume here in Austin we mirror the organization of the United Nations itself?
Yes, best we possibly can with what we have as far as a secretariat and a conference of its size. Some things we do have like a secretariat is we do have a Security Council, much like the United Nations. We also have an International Court of Justice, which they have. We have another council, which is Social Humanitarian, and we also have Economic and Social Council, and we have Special Political Council as well. In addition to that, we also have a certain area, it's more like a secretariat function, which we call crisis, when we introduce problems to each committee that they have to solve before they continue on with their normal committee functioning. And that's usually done by secretary member.
Introducing the crisis?
Introduces the crisis, usually in the form of a press update that is basically sprung on a committee at a moment's notice. They're basically given printouts and they're shuffled off to what we call a press room, and they have a press conference with the key members of whatever the crisis is. If it's a breakout of violence in Northern Ireland, we bring in people for the IRA, Sinn Féin, and also members of the Labour Party in Britain.
I like that phrase, shuffled off to a press conference room, because that sounds very much like what happens in real life. Folks may not fully be prepared for a press conference at that point. I wonder what you find as a student participant is happening with these high school students. What kind of growth or development or understandings do you see happening in some of these kids?
Well, a lot of them complexify their worldviews. A lot of them see different worldviews not only as background, and they see into the depths of different issues around our world today. A lot of them also learn very good speaking styles. A lot of them learn how to speak publicly. A lot of them also learn what it takes to not only draft a resolution, but see through all the different stages, through the amendments, and also through the different intellectual processes that are part of the United Nations. And for that reason, they basically get not only a good grasp of what the world issues are, but how they affect the people in the world, but also how they're affected by people in positions of power.
We're creating some world citizens. Would you agree with that, or is there something else you see from your perspective in the classroom, Babette?
I agree with what Adam's saying. I think that it's an incredible opportunity for these students to really deal with real life issues and deal with them using a lot of critical thinking skills. This simulation is just such an enriched curriculum, and I think all schools really should participate in this, because this is really building citizens for the future, and it's putting them in a very powerful decision-making mode, and it just empowers the students so much when they're able to be treated with respect and make decisions like adults are making decisions every day, and they are young adults. And Adam and all of the UT students are incredible mentors and models for these students. I mean, he won't say that, but I mean, it's just amazing the effort and that they put into working with these students. It's an overwhelming thing to just watch. And I think spiritually it brings all these kids together, and they see different cultures. You have Muslims and you have Christians, and you have, I mean, all of the religions are represented as far as, through their role playing and their interest. And and their goal is world peace. We need that today. And so those are just some of the other, positive things that come out of this this organization and this simulation.
Great. We'll get some good, caring people. Not a moment too soon. Well, Babette just talked a little bit about spirituality, and The Model United Nations program and involvement has got to be so much work sometimes. What is it that for you is so important about this program, Mary, that you give time and energy, you fundraise, you recruit? Why this program?
As long as I can remember, I have been interested in people throughout the world, not just my community, although they're important to me also. Perhaps it started when my mother said, "Clean your plate because there are people starving in the world." You know, the old story. But I took that seriously. And as a representative of the Christian church, and I'm sure all faiths would have this same concern, I'm very much aware of the poverty that exists in other countries, in the developing countries, and that it is incumbent upon us to help them develop in a way that will raise their standards of living. Also, the World Health Organization has been a marvelous help in eradicating smallpox, for one thing, among others, and helping children. One of the things that I like about the Model UN program is that it teaches children, well, young people, young adults, the scope of the work of the United Nations. I think most people aren't aware that the United Nations is behind a lot of things. And in television and all, it may say the international community. They don't always give the UN credit for work that's being done throughout the world. It was organized so that war and the scourge of war would not continue. And many of the agencies that are connected with the United Nations are preventive things, addressing poverty, the issues of refugees, women's problems, child labor, the labor organizations. I mean, they're doing so many things to prevent conflict. And I think young people need to be aware that the United Nations is active in these issues.
And certainly a good hope for peace and justice. You're right.
Yes.
And Bobette, you used a minute ago the word spirituality, and I wonder if you could speak a little bit about your personal reasons for being involved, for giving so much time and energy after long days in the classroom to a program like this. Is there something perhaps in your faith background that motivates you?
Well, I'm obviously a product of the 60s culture, and I definitely have an interest in world peace and women's issues and what Mary was talking. All of those things appeal to me, and spiritually I think what I like about it is that it brings kids from so many different cultures together, and in 3 days these kids bond, and it's a community that we've created. We've created a unique community within this community, and it's based on respect and just tolerance. And to me, that I don't know if that's what you're wanting, but you know, that appeals to me, and I think that's the kind of thing that teachers and educators need to be working and encouraging with our students, because we need to have a tolerant society. You know, the world is becoming a kind of a scary place if we take tolerance out of the picture and we don't have an understanding of other people's cultures and religions. And I think this is an opportunity for them to role play themselves in a different just to role play in a different situation than they're normally comfortable with in their everyday life.
A good
It
place
forces
for
them.
you to live out your commitment, isn't it?
And
And Adam, you've chosen or been chosen to take on a major leadership responsibility while working on a master's degree. What motivates you? Why is the Model UN program important, considering all the other things you might be doing with your time?
One, it's enjoyable. It is an enjoyable activity to do at the University of Texas. and you do make a lot of good friends. But the big thing is that the United Nations has a great deal of worth in that it deals with a lot of moral issues that the international community is engaged with at the current time.
For instance?
Well, the conference that we're putting on this next year, and next really part of winter, we deal with such hot topics as organ transplants in China, forced organ transplants. We also deal with child soldiers and different questions around that. We also deal with ethnic cleansing. We also have the students focus on a lot of other issues such as different developments in third world countries either being hindered or helped by first world help, by assistance. And we're also talking about other health-related issues such as international problems related to Ebola and other types of diseases. So there is a large moral focus of the group.
Do you find in your work with the conference that while the delegates are able to speak from the perspective of their country, you still hear some of them coming through?
Oh, definitely. I mean, everyone's own personal opinions and their feelings do come through. They does come filtered through their country's positions, but we've had people basically speak from their own heart. Well, you always have people speaking from their own heart, even though they try to fit the mold of what their country would do. And many people do pick what I would consider the moral choice or what is the beneficial choice, even though they are representing a country that may not necessarily have that same position.
And what difference is this going to make in your life?
Well,
that you have done this?
That I've done this? Well, it'll show me a lot about pain and time. One thing is that it will definitely show me about some of the things that go into running a large organization and being a member of the bureaucracy of a large organization, but also it's just something for me that's enjoyable.
That's good to know, in the midst of everything else, that there are young people who enjoy putting themselves in this kind of work. And maybe in just a phrase, you all could say what you'd like the Austin community to do to help support. We've got about 30 seconds left. How can the Austin community support the Model United Nations program?
Well, just really talk about it and find interested people to go and learn a little bit more about our group.
Okay.
If your child's school is not involved in this at the high school level, inquire about starting a club or whatever at that school so they can participate in our conference in January.
I have to interject something else that we've left out. We couldn't do this without our junior high school students. They act as pages, and they put out their International Press Corps. But to answer your question,
Right, we just got a few seconds.
yes.
Well, maybe we'll have to come back when we do another follow-up on the UN program. Thank you all so much for being here today, and best wishes for the conference in January. Thank you for being with us on Austin Faith Dialogue today.